Hi, I'm the Master Levi Cherbulenko, and in this series I explore the typical mistakes of people rated anywhere between 8000 and 2000. This is a first reaction, no engine analysis, of a chess.com gameplay between 1535 versus 1530. Let's see. Alright, so e4, c6, the Caro-Kann defense, knight f3, that's okay, developing the knight. The main move would be d4. The rule of thumb is this. If your opponent allows you to put 2 pawns in the center, you should put 2 pawns in the center. Usually, you know, we play like maybe like c5, the Sicilian defense, or e5, right? And then it's not ideal to put the second pawn in the center. Why? Because they take, and then if you take with the queen, then they're gonna develop, you know, their knight with tempo, and thus they're gonna develop faster. Instead of you developing the minor pieces, you have to waste time and move your queen back, so it's not ideal. So that's why if they play c5, e5, you can't really play d4 immediately. You'd have to prepare it. First play knight f3, then d4, or as is the case of as is the case of c5, you know, you'd have to play knight f3 first, d6, and now d4 takes, and knight takes. This way, even if they play knight c6, these are pieces of the same value, so you don't need to put your knight back, you know, so you can continue your normal development. So, but if they allow you, if they play like c6 or e6, that's the rule of thumb. They put a pawn on the 6th rank, or g6, you push d4 if they allow you. So that's why d4 would be more precise. But okay, knight f3 is okay, but it's not the best. Okay, d5, knight c3, developing the knight, defending the pawn, alright. Bishop g4, that's a good move, developing the bishop, pinning the knight. You know, the thing is, black would like maybe to play e6 at some point to strengthen this d5 pawn and open up this bishop, but then this bishop would be kind of stupid, right? And also it's kind of like a locked position, closed position, and in closed positions, you know, bishops are not as great because they are like locked behind these pawns, whereas the knights, they can like jump back and forth, right? So it makes sense for black to trade this bishop, right? Okay, bishop e2. That's a little bit too passive. It's okay, it's not a big mistake, but it's too passive. In the opening, don't just play passively. Like, try to get as much initiative as you can. Don't just try to, like, you know, get by and like finish the development. Try to play the best moves. Put your pieces on the most active positions possible, you know. It's just too passive. So, I mean, the main move is actually, I believe, pawn h3, attack the bishop. But I believe it's the main move, right? And when it takes, then you take with a queen, and then maybe you're gonna play pawn d4. Let's say play e6 or something. You could play pawn d4. It's not the only move, obviously, but you could play pawn d4 and put the bishop on d3, not on e2, but on d3, on a much better diagonal. Or I don't know. Or maybe you could even feint it to the bishop potentially. There's ideas like bishop g2, something like this. But it's more active. This is more active. You activate the queen, put pressure on the d5 pawn, and you have a power of 2 bishops. There's also this idea of d3 also, and if they take, you could even maybe take the pawn, keep your pawn in the center, maybe even castle long. It depends how black plays. But h3 would be a more active move. Bishop e2, too passive. Okay, e6, alright, that's fine. d4, okay, that's fine. Bishop b4, pinning the knight. Okay, that's okay. ed, because now the e4 pawn is hanging, right? So d would have been a threat. Right, so ed, okay. ed, cd, yeah, black has no problems. This actually already should be probably better for black. Why? Because he has the semi-open c file where he'll put soon the rook and attack our c2 pawn, our c3 knight. His bishop is outside the chain, so here it would have been very poor, but here it's outside the chain, you know, so it's more active. Plus we can just trade against our knight or against our bishop, and by the way, even if it's outside the chain, it's still worse than this bishop. This bishop is worse than this bishop because it's still limited by his own pawns, you know, so it's still worse. So, and it's worse than this knight because this knight could potentially go to e5 and be a great central knight, right? Whereas this bishop is still poor, so that's why it's actually favorable for black to exchange it either against the knight or against our bishop. Either way is good for black. So yeah, this is good for black. Black has no problems. Okay, h3. Now h3. I mean, now h3 already doesn't make sense. Now already it's too slow. Why? because I mean, one, when we take the bishop, and now like the bishop is stuck, I mean, and two, like I said, in this situation, black is not against, I mean, taking this knight anyway, because this knight on e5 would have been stronger than the bishop, so they might take it anyway. So we just help them, and it's too slow in this situation. Earlier it would have been fine, it would have been different, but here it's too slow. So I think maybe white should have just like maybe just castled or something, you know. I mean, there's also maybe the idea of 95. Yes, we help the exchange, but there's the concrete idea. We take over queen, and then we have queen b5 check, attacking the king, attacking the b7 pawn, and attacking the b4 bishop, you know. And also this knight is pretty good. f7 also potentially weak. There's also ideas like queen h5 attacking f7. So see, this is another thing, strategy and tactics and dynamics. Tactics and dynamics, yes, from a pure strategical point, it might be not the best idea. The trading of this bishop, we exchange the good bishop against the bad bishop, right? So from the statics point of view, this is seemingly bad, but from the dynamics point of view, it does make some sense because it gives us concrete play. So that's why I remember this concept, like you might have moves that are like strategically maybe unsound, but they work in the moment. They give you concrete tactical or dynamic ideas, explosive ideas, concrete stuff, right? So that's why don't just think in theory, oh, but good bishop, bad bishop. Think concretely, okay? So statics versus dynamics. So okay, h3 is kind of slow. Takes, okay. 97, that's actually an interesting move, I should say. So the point is that I guess black wants to put the knight on f5, another knight on c6, and attack the d4 pawn. That's a pretty interesting point, although I think it's pretty easy for white to defend. White could just play like castles, and then play knight e2, move e2, e2, and then play pawn to c3 and strengthen the pawn. So it's okay, but knight f6 also would have been fine for black. But okay, it's too slow. I mean, I see the point. It's not like any big mistake or anything, but I think it's a bit slow. I think white should have just castled. Now, if black takes on c3, yes, we have double pawns, but we have two bishops. And the b file, pressure on the b7 pawn, there's ideas like bishop a3, putting pressure on this diagonal, this bishop. So there's two ideas. We could either play pawn to c4, put pressure here, and then if they take, we take on b7. That's how we use this bishop, right? You know, and if they do not take, we could either push the pawn further, right, and gain space, and then play rook b1, and then after rook b1, pawn to c5, we fix the b7 weakness, you know, because we play c5. Or there's another idea. We could maybe even play cd, they play ed, and then push again c4, and put again pressure on d5. So that's one way to utilize this bishop. Or another way would be to play bishop e2, and put it on d3. There's really two ways. The only one thing you don't want to do is just like leave it on f3 and not play c4, not do anything about it. That's like the worst. So you either, you know, make it work, this diagonal, by playing c4, or you regroup. You put it on d3 and then attack h7, maybe ideas like queen h5 and stuff, right? Something like that. Yeah. But okay. But if they do not take, by the way, let's say we go like here, okay, knight e2, good move, preparing c3 so that we have a nice and a neat pawn structure, pawn chain, and then this knight we can you know, remaneuver it. We can move it to g3, and then h5 or f4, and then h5 attacking g7, which is a pretty weak link for black, by the way, you know. Or we could also put it on f4, and then from f4 we could put it on d3. d3 is a pretty ideal square for the knight, because it can go to e5, right controls e5, it can go to c5. Also, by the way, black's plan, after we have a pawn on c3, might be a pawn minority attack with b5, b4, right? Because the c3 pawn would be like a pawn hook, so they could use it like a pawn hook to open up files. So the knight from d3 also postpones b4, right? Black from playing b4. So remember, d3 is an ideal square for the knight. There's only one thing, one downside though. It's good, but it should be temporary d3. Like we use d3 as a teleport square to somewhere else, maybe ideally to like e5 or c5 or you know, or something like that. Why? Because you need to think also about your bishop. See, that's the problem for white here. d3 is, I mean, it's, if you just think about the knight, it's ideal for the knight, for all those aforementioned reasons, but it's also ideal for the bishop. It's just a nice central square. It has two diagonals, right, both ways, and so it's also ideal for the bishop. And that's the conflict. Ideal for the knight, ideal for the bishop. How do you solve it? So that's why you can use it as a teleport square for the knight to go where you want, and then put the bishop long term. So it's good for the bishop long term, but for the knight, as you know, just temporary, you know. Like I said, maybe on a, or maybe you don't even put the knight on d3. Like I said, maybe you play, you know, knight f4 and then knight h5, and then maybe just like queen d2, queen g5, you know, there's sacrifice ideas, stuff like that. Okay, and put your bishop on d3. So you combine this. You'd have a bishop on d3 attacking h7, a knight on h5. You can maybe, by the way, if you put your bishop on d3, knight on h5, you could maybe even then play queen f3, or in fact not even queen f3, wait a bit, queen g4 straight away, yeah, queen g4, and then attack g7. So again, just to show you, you'd play here, 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 and then queen g4 attacking g7, and this bishop attacks h7, and then this bishop might come to h6. It's just very good. That's the downside, by the way, that's the downside, that's a more advanced tip, of knight e7. If the knight was on f6, none of this would have been possible, because the knight on f6, one would have guarded the g4 square, so the queen couldn't come to g4, and two would have guarded, more importantly, the h5 square, so that the knight cannot go to h5. I mean, then if white plays knight h5, they would have just taken. Would have just been exchange, and without the knight, there's no attack. For white to succeed on the kingside attack, white needs a knight. Queen and knight tandem is the best. Queen and knight tandem. Without the knight, there's no attack. So that's why this is another rule of thumb. Although this might look fancy and stuff, f6 is the proven, is the tested way. It defends h5, g4, and also very key, it defends h7. It defends h7. Okay, so that's why knight f6 is usually the best. So yeah, you see now my point. Bishop d2, it is, I mean, it is too slow. Okay, knight c6, okay. e3, I mean, I see the point. I see the point. Or could have just played knight d2, also would have been fine. I mean, because again, this bishop, I mean, if you look at the pawn structure, soon white will play c3, will be on the same color as his pawns. And if you look at black's pawns, this bishop is pretty good. Strategically, this bishop is better than our bishop. So an exchange would not be bad. That's one. It would be good for white because this is potentially a poor bishop for white, right? From a strategical point of view, from a pawn's point of view. Whereas black's bishop is good. That's one. The second reason would be the squares. Because black has all these pawns on light squares, f7, e6, d5, automatically he has weak dark squares, like c5, like e5. So if he kept the bishop, right, then when you want to put a knight on e5 or c5, he can take, so he controls his weak squares. Whereas if you exchange, then eventually, when you put a knight here, he cannot take it with his bishop. He has one less defender, right? So this way you exploit even more his weak dark squares. So when you have situations like this, it makes sense to trade. Now, there's one advanced tip. There's one reason why white might not want to do this, despite all those things. I'm not saying white shouldn't do it, but there's one reason against it. True for it, but also one against it. And that is, although strategically this might be like a worse bishop than this, but if you remember like what I showed you with our kingside attack earlier, right, with like castles and knight e2, all that stuff, knight h5 here, 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 this is a great attacking bishop. Because you have ideas like bishop h6, right, bishop g5, like it's just looking at the king side. We might use it for a sacrifice, maybe black eventually plays pawns h6, maybe we sack the bishop, maybe we play queen g4 and pin the g7 pawn by playing bishop h6, maybe we play bishop g5. My point is, on the queen side and in the center, maybe strategically it's worse than black's bishop. But it's a great attacking piece on the king side. It might be a key piece to finish black off on the king side attack. So that's another thing that happens very often. You may have a bishop on the first rank that may look poor, it's restricted by your pawns, like strategically it's not good, your opponent's bishop is better, but it has the potential to attack on the king side, and that sometimes might be more important. So keep this in mind as well, okay? But okay, a3, bishop a5, knight e2, so he did play knight e2, okay. Takes, okay. Yeah, now this bishop is so misplaced. Because now, c4, now white is not on the table, I mean. So that's why white should put the bishop as quickly as he can on d3, yeah. Knight f5, okay. Now already knight h4 might be an idea, by the way. Putting pressure here, putting pressure here. And also queen b6 might be coming, yeah? Putting pressure here and here. Okay, let's see. Pawn to c3. Castles, not knight h4, okay. G3, knight g3. I don't know, why not knight f4 simply? I think would have been more logical. Knight f4 and then castle. And then maybe play knight d3 temporary, right? To then maybe put it on, depending how black plays, either on e5, but supported by the rook e1, and then knight e5, or knight c5, even better would be. Because we don't want to really trade. If you want to play for a win, you want to keep more pieces, at least one knight, yeah? So ideally we would want to put the knight on c5 and then put the bishop via e2 to d3, this great diagonal. We definitely, ultimately, have to put the bishop on d3, whereas the knight, we're going to put it on d3 just temporary, okay? Alright, so I think this is, because to double the pawns, why would you double the pawns? You just double up your pawns, I don't see the point. I mean, to open up the f-file, yeah, but will you have enough pressure on the f-file? I don't think so. So I think this is a bit inaccurate. But okay, takes. Knight a5, okay, not a bad move, not a bad move. Going to c4, yeah, c4 is pretty weak for white. Now there's also another idea, potentially, because this is weak. There's also the idea of potentially, let's say, queen d6, attacking the pawn, and then let's say white goes queen f2 or something, and then there's this idea of knight e7, knight f5. f5 is also pretty good for black, for the black's knight, attacking g3. So this also would have been pretty good for black. There's also obviously the idea of, let's say, queen f2, because the king is still in the center. There's the idea of e5, playing explosively in the center. Again, it's strategy versus statics versus dynamics. Statically, we think, oh, but then white takes and black will end up with a weak isolated pawn. But that's statics. But dynamically, black gets lots of activity, and white's king is in the center. So that's more important. If white manages to consolidate, protect his king, develop his other pieces, then yes, long term, the d5 pawn might become a weakness. But if white does not manage to consolidate, then the dynamic factor is more important. So black had this as well, yeah. But okay, here queen c2, yeah, I mean, or could have just played bishop e2 to prevent it, right? And then bishop d3. I mean, knight c4, white, I guess, could just take. Is okay, or move a queen then if he wants to, and then bishop d3, attack h7. Either way, the bishop on f3 is stupid, is stuck, and we need bishop e2 anyway, whether we're gonna take the knight or not, it doesn't matter. Okay, here. Yeah, now I guess white just realized he went to castle, but he realized the knight e3, double attack, right? I mean, such a waste of time. Queen c2, and then queen f2, what is this? It's too bad, of course, yeah, but okay. Queen of2, queen b, yeah. Already black has clear initiative, right? Here, yeah, I mean, how do you, because rook b1 versus knight a3, game over. Rook a2 versus queen b3, rook moves on queen b2, game over. To move a pawn, I mean, would be too weakening. It would weaken the a3 pawn, the second rank, and the c3 pawn would weaken, right? Then black would just move the knight, and then would just play rook c8 and just attack the c3 pawn. Plus, there's even this idea after b3 to play queen a5, and then, oh, maybe it doesn't work, because takes, check, there's king u2, and rook's guarding rook. Yeah, but just knight d6, rook c8 is fine. b4 is bad for similar reasons, except it also allows black to play a5 and then open up the a file. And finally, to castle is too risky. You do not want to have your pawns pushed forward from your king in opposite castling situation, because these a3, c3 pawns are a pawn hook for a5, b5, b4, opening up the files. and so white has no chance. You see? So there's no good. No, actually, wait a bit. What am I saying? B3, black just takes. So yeah, just takes. Yeah. Do you see one slow move or one or two slow moves, and you're done. And you're done. Yeah. Okay. Here. Takes. Here. Let's see 4. Well, yeah, but or knight here also would have been fine. Maybe even stronger. I don't know. Attacking the c3 pawn. Because the a3 pawn is weak anyway, you know. But if we take the c3 pawn, then also the d4 pawn becomes undefended, becomes super weak, becomes a great target, you know. And if they defend it, I mean, we could just play b6, let's say, I don't know, or maybe not b6, because now rook b4 would be a threat, and then the knight would be trapped. But maybe like rook c8 put even more pressure on the c3 pawn, you know, something like this. And then we could play b6 here. And yeah, something like this. But okay, he played here, attacking the a3 pawn, which also makes sense. It also makes sense, you could argue, oh, but now black gets the passer, and this pawn is anyway weak, and black could maybe later on win it. This way we win the a3 pawn, get the passer, win the c3 pawn, and potentially the d4 pawn. So, I mean, it also makes sense. Rook a1, here, knight c4. But actually, the way it worked in the game, see, it doesn't seem as good. I think knight a4 would have been stronger. Yeah, from what I see happening in the game. Yeah, should have been stronger than knight a4. Going after the c3 pawn. Yeah, because yeah, this way is fine for white. Yeah. Okay, here. I mean, white is still worse, of course, because the knight is better than the bishop. It's kind of like a fixed pawn structure when the knights are stronger. When the knights are stronger in these kind of positions, and the c3 pawn is very weak. So there's ideas like rook b3 after like g6. So g4, I mean, what can I say? Putting another pawn on the color of a bishop. Yeah. But I understand to make like a window for the king. Maybe bishop e2 should have played. Get rid of a knight. You know. But I mean, obviously black can just move a knight. Okay, here h6. Bishop e2. Check. Here. Rook b3. Here. Threatening rook a checkmate. Yeah, that's why h6 is not ideal. Black should have played g6, not h6. Yeah. Wait, what? This is crazy. Wow. I should have just played g6. Check here. And then just take. And then black can play for a win. Yeah, alright. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.